FAA, and now here at Chemonics with a leading implementing partner, and someone whose understanding of the community was evidenced when he was selected as the Public Sector Partner of the Year several years ago at the Greater Washington Government Contractors event. And Rodney Bent, hardly finally. Rodney, who many of you know from his time at the Millennium Challenge Corporation, previously at OMB with time with the Coalition Provisional Authority in Baghdad, and now at Booz Allen. Again, you have people who have seen it all, or virtually everything on the two sheets that I distributed. And I'm going to ask them to particularly focus on three questions. First, I think, would be from their own experience, what are some of the most significant lessons they would point to about what has worked, what worked perhaps best in a given circumstance, what things we have learned in terms of improving any of the instruments going forward. Second, I'd like them to speak to how the Obama administration's reform initiatives, the Presidential Study Directive and the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, how should they address the trade-offs? And in today's context, which factors do our panelists think might be most important? And finally, and this is where I think the conversation with all of you and the way we wrap this session up later will help us, is how can the SID-Washington community help those who are leading these initiatives arrive at sound policy choices that are based on evidence rather than purely on opinion? Evidence is kind of hard to round up and hard to locate on some of these themes. Opinion is abundant, and we all have them. But I think that's going to be a really important criterion. I know that from talking with some of the leaders of the QDDR, the principle of evidence-based decision is very important to them, and I think our community has a really good role to play there. So without further ado, let me ask Diana Esposito to lead off for the panel.
Thank you. When I was first asked to speak here, I just assumed it would be a group of about 15, 20 people would be interested in this topic. And when I found out the number, I kept asking people, saying, why are so many people interested in this, and what do they expect to hear? And I was told this morning by Mike Walsh, oh, they only want to know the answer. Great, thank you, Mike. Not too much pressure. The answer is, when you're looking at choice of instrument, is, and it's an answer no one wants to hear, but it is the answer, is it depends. There are instances when the federal agency, whether it be aid or HHS or energy, needs contracts, and there are instances when it would be cooperative agreements. Keep in mind, and I do have a handout that you should have, it's a two-page, I think it's two double-side pages. Most of you got. And when I try to compile, it just said what this is really variations on a theme. Keep in mind there are only two basic instruments. Whether it's a grant, cooperative agreement, contract, doesn't matter. Two basic instruments are, it's either fixed price or it's cost reimbursable. And everything is just variations on a theme. The one, just hearkening to the basic question, is there's the basic thing that the federal government has to consider is really risk management. That gets to the trade-offs. That's what a trade-off is risk management. What is the ultimate goal they are trying to achieve? That should be the driver to the type of instrument. The other thing to keep in mind that I wanted to impress on this group in working with the higher political types of the agency as they're trying to formulate things is the one thing that I haven't seen too much of now being on this side versus having worked for the government is there seems to be an inherent lack of flexibility on the part of implementers. So there are a myriad of instruments and variations thereof that aid has access to. Under the Foreign Assistance Act of 1931, I think it's Section 635B, it gives a federal agency an enormous amount of authority to do contracts, grants, endowments, and one phrase I love, other instruments. Lots of flexibility in there. Other federal agencies, when I was at AID, some of the innovations that I was, patted on the back for, in fact, weren't. They were just sort of things I borrowed from what I saw other federal agencies do. They're fixed obligation grants, something I borrowed from, I think it was HUD and Department of Energy were doing. So I think one of the things in looking at is, as Tony was saying, you know, where are the past lessons? A lot of the past lessons aren't just at aid. Aid does, of course, have that experience, the development experience. That is part of what, of course, what their mandate is, what they do. Some of that is different. Some of it really isn't. They are a federal agency, and I just saw a kind of a lack of looking at what other federal agencies do, a lot of innovations other federal agencies do. They could just easily borrow from that, and also then flow it down. Give it to the implementers, and let the implementers have a lot of this flexibility. And that seems to be absent because there seems to be just a general lack of knowledge and understanding of what these basic authorities are. So just kind of briefly go through this list. Fixed obligation grants, and what I try to lay out on here, it just sort of understanding of what the authorities are, considerations for the recipient, considerations for aid, that's your trade-offs, that's your risk management. And then I just, some of my thoughts that are just, as Tony mentioned, we all have opinions, these are just mine, on what I'm seeing is sort of underutilization by the implementer of this type of instrument. This is a wonderful instrument. When you're overseas working with tiny organizations, you need to get specific objectives done. Wonderful instrument. A lot of people are just are not aware of this. It's not publicly known, even though it is an ADS 303. There's just a lot of hesitancy in using it because it does look different from the standard aid type cost reimbursable instrument. Leveraging versus cost share. Cost share is something any of us who've received cooperative agreements is familiar with. Leveraging, great use of term aid has sort of embraced lately. But I just think, again, it's being underutilized. This is something working in cooperative agreement world easily can do. This makes everyone look great. The benefit is you don't have that same burden that you have with cost share of all of those O&B rules for documentation. What you can do is work with a lot of other partners, get credit for it, but more importantly, aid gets credit for it and can present it a bigger looking program to Congress. It's something that, again, it's a little bit known in the agency, not very well known on the implementing side. Leader with Associate Awards, another innovation aid has done. Again, I think as implementers, we can take this and use this as we're giving out sub-grants, whether we're a contractor or a cooperative agreement recipient. But take this, see what the model is, and then start adapting it for your own implementing purposes. In-kind grants, similar to fixed obligation grants. Here, if your benefit is, if your intention is to help small organizations, very beneficial. You can then take this, you purchase items, hand it off, actually give it to the local organizations. Most beneficial for smaller companies, smaller structures, but again, being underutilized. I think there's just one or two models that aid and we are used to working with, so start seeing what else is out there. Host country contracts, and this is, Rodney is going to